So today we're going to be talking about building capacity and talent in the charity sector. Just very briefly, a little bit of background on me. 12 years ago, I launched a business called Thompson and Terry Recruitment, which I've recently exited, and the team that I've built have taken leadership of the business, which I'm super proud of. I'm super passionate about working with employers. To whether that be a big global brand or whether that be a small charity to attract, recruit, and retain talent. And I think for me, that attract, recruit, and retain, I think is really key. And outside the world of recruitment, well, I'm completely outside of the world of recruitment now, having sold my business. I host Oxford's only business radio show, The Business Brunch on Get Radio, and do various other bits of mentoring and support in the space, and including presentations like this. Anyway, enough about me. So let's dive into some of the things that we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be talking about internships, work experience, and trainee roles. So we're talk really about how can charities offer pathways that support both the candidate and your organisation. I'll talk more about it in a moment, but I think it's really key that how do we support both sides? I think how anything works in the world of business is where there is that win-win. We're going to be talking about how do you stand out as an employer, how to stand out in a crowded job market and get noticed faster. And I think that, again, without giving too much of a spoiler, for me, I think it's really important from a recruitment perspective. We remember that we're employers. Bringing in great talent and how to attract candidates from other sectors and support their transition. As brilliantly touched on by Jenny, there is a transition, and how do we support this to ensure that it is that win for candidate employer, retaining the best. And I want to be quite practical in this section. Really talk about practical strategies to hold on to the best people. How do we ensure that we are growing together? Aspirations are aligned. The smile on the face is there and the purpose is there. And of course, as brilliantly touched on, youth unemployment. For any that follow me on LinkedIn, you'll know that I'm passionate about the youth unemployment crisis, and it's a really big problem here in Oxfordshire, which I feel that we all, charities, the public sector, the private sector, all have an important part in supporting that. And I'm going to be talking very much from a charity angle, whether charities can play a bigger role in tackling that youth unemployment crisis. And it's lovely to see Oxfordshire youth in the room today. So thank you for that. So just a little bit about the charity employment landscape. As touched on by Jenny, I delivered a similar presentation 2 years ago, and it's really interesting how these four numbers have changed. So the people employed in the charity sector has grown. There's more people employed, but there's actually slightly less trustees and volunteers. For those who can't see my screen, so there's 1.7 million people that are employed across charities in the UK, 291,000 trustees, 6.5 million wonderful volunteers. And in small charities, 53% of people in the sector are employed by charities that have fewer than 50 staff. I think that there's a perception and there's a myth that the very big charities, the Save the Children or the Oxfams of this world, make up a big percentage, but actually more people work for small charities than indeed large. And I think we need to remember that the charity sector plays a significant part of the UK workforce. And I think that actually the private and the public sector can learn so much from charities in terms of values and culture and impact. But equally, I feel that the charity sector can learn more from those sectors as well, in terms of that, particularly that recruitment and retention piece, which as we know is more critical than ever. So let's dive into why charities need to stand out. So as we saw in the previous slide, charities are competing directly with the commercial sector in most cases. So if you are a charity and you are looking to recruit a administrator or a corporate fundraiser or a marketing assistant, you're directly competing with um, public sector roles, with public sector benefits. You're competing with very commercial roles that have typically have larger salaries, potentially have more opportunity for growth, and probably more opportunity for creativity in some cases. If you look back at my old organization, if Aoife, the managed our marketing for a period of time, had an idea that she wanted to deliver, she could have a yes from me within seconds. In the charity sector, it's really important that we have trustees, as we know, and it's really important that we can justify the decisions that we make, and rightly so. But I think we need to remember that it is a crowded market, and it's not just okay to put an advert out there and say, come and work for us, we're a great charity. We really need to think about how can we stand out. Um, I think creative approaches can pay off. As I touched on, we have limited budgets, so we need to think about innovative thinking to attract quality candidates quickly, and cost effectively. And for me, I think that falls into probably two or three categories. The first thing is I think that our purpose and our cause, or what we do as a charity, is going to have a drive. And I'm going to be very cliche here. If you are the donkey sanctuary, you are going to be attractive to an animal lover, or if you're the RSPCA or whatever. Of course you are. But that is just one area, and play on that. But in terms of this cost of living crisis of a couple of years ago, which is probably talked about slightly less now, can you think about, is flexible working a thing? Like, would it make sense for some of your staff to be able to work around school drop off and pick up? Would there be the flexibility to work from home part of the time? If you're working with second career individuals who are maybe at the stage where they can have a bus pass, is there a reason why they can't come into work around those periods of time? How can you be flexible and encourage that? Think about potentially training. So if you have a relatively junior HR vacancy, actually, what funding can you access in order to give that individual a qualification around work rather than potentially paying it themselves? We all know, without being an accountant in the room, if an employee wants to do their CIPD and they're paying it out of their salary, they've already paid tax on it, then they're going to pay for a qualification. But actually, if you're able to do that before tax, whether that be as a salary sacrifice or in lieu of a pay rise, that can make a really, really big difference. I think brand builds loyalty is an area that I'm really keen to talk about. A strong employer brand reduces turnover costs, drives referrals, and attracts candidates who share your values. I totally get, in every organization, we can be resource short, particularly within the charity sector. But actually, I think it's really important as charities, and this is almost more of a marketing lesson than a recruitment lesson. We should be, building a Glassdoor review and asking our staff, a Glassdoor page, and ask our staffs to write their experiences of working for you as a charity. We should be, as part of our social media strategy, we shouldn't just be talking about our service users. We should be talking about the community around us, our staff, how we engage. We should be putting in place opportunities for followers and supporters of our charity to approach us about future vacancies. I think there's a real opportunity there. By far the biggest cost of recruitment is when it goes wrong. And actually we need to move away from the firefighting. So we are absolutely desperate for a bid writer because we want to go for this grant that's really important. The close date is we need to recruit somebody within 2 weeks, and we need to settle. Actually building that employer brand over a period of time will drastically reduce the cost of recruitment and attract those people that believe in your brand and show loyalty there. The next area where I feel that there's real opportunity is internships, work experience, and trainee roles. I appreciate the whole volunteer versus paid employee is a subject that we keep for another day. But actually, I think that the benefits of internships and work experience and trainee roles can create such pathways in order to create a win for employer and candidates. I'm going to use another example around marketing. I promise it will be my last marketing example. But in my former business, about 20% of our business was placing marketing candidates. We also created our own graduate program, and we worked with a lot of schools, colleges, and universities. Marketing is something you can learn. Of course, it is. You can do a degree in marketing. Fine, absolutely. But actually, what we're finding is getting that first opportunity in marketing is near impossible. Maybe near impossible strong, almost near impossible, without some form of opportunity. Whenever we posted a trainee marketing role, we would have so many applications and so many candidates that have been desperate for that route in. So I think by creating an internship or work experience or training opportunities, it can be hugely beneficial to charities with low resource, to bring in fresh ideas and fresh opportunities. But it also gives really tangible experience to that individual. And we're going to come on to the youth unemployment crisis later because actually internships, work experience, and trainee roles aren't exclusive to youth. But by creating a role that gives really tangible experience, I think can just can really give an opportunity for somebody to kickstart their career and build that really tangible career that they're looking for, but also can add real value. I think my advice here is always see this as a real pathway. Don't design a role that is just cheap labor or free labor or whatever. I think it's really important that any internship, work experience, or trainee role creates a real genuine opportunity to get skill and development and build that opportunity and build that experience on the CV. I think it's really important that the role makes sense for you as a charity. I I totally get that some of the kindest people in the world work for charities, but I think that sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind. And I think that an opportunity isn't just saying, come and sit at a desk and we can say that you've done work experience with us. Actually, it's what's right for you as a charity. A friend of mine, who I won't quote, albeit has said this as a public event, whilst they're really grateful that people keep offering to paint their rooms, it doesn't really help them. Their rooms are painted so regularly. Actually, it's about they want other things. They just find it hard to say no. So really think about how can these programs add real capacity to your team while supporting that candidate's career journey. I think we've spoken a lot about that mutual benefit. So really think about if you had an unlimited budget in your charity, what would your org chart look like? What would be those skills? And where is the opportunity to fill some of those with internships, work experience, and trainee roles to create that real win-win? I think scoping out the vacancy is something that every good employer should do, and I think that every I think it's impossible to fill a role without doing this successfully. You may get lucky, but I think that it would be luck. So I think the first thing is about really defining the role before you do anything. So, what is the title of this role? What are the responsibilities? What are the expectations and skills required? Be really honest about it. I think that it's really important that we're not selling a dream, but equally, it's really important that we're not being really modest here. It's important that we give the good, the bad, and the ugly of that opportunity and really define what is the benefit to the candidate, what will they be doing, how will that role develop over a period of time, and what will be the impact? I think a big part of the charity sector, in my experience, is about impact. So, how is that role defined? And I think that one of the things that I always think is a sign of good recruitment is when let's get ahead of ourselves, the candidate joins, they look back in a year's time, the employer, as a result of a robust interview process, should be able to say that candidate was exactly what we were expecting. And the candidate should look back and say, this role was exactly what we were expecting. I think that's really, really important. And some of those things I think are not necessarily things that you will think of. I think we can all understand what an administration vacancy does or what a charity CEO does, two ends of the spectrum. But actually, if you're a charity that is very short of resource, and I think in the breakout room at the start we were talking about, a flat roof that leaks. If you are struggling building wise, and every time it rains, somebody is going to have a wet desk. I know it sounds small, but let's communicate that. Actually, if there are challenges within the charity, let's really kind of communicate that up front. And then I think it's about identifying the ideal candidate. Think about your values, your experience, your motivators, not just the qualifications on paper. I think that in my experience, the biggest reason that a role works is totally aligned aspirations and totally aligned values. And I think be quite selective with or be quite open with this in terms of I think you should be asking yourself like probably two or three questions in the okay, so what skills must they have? What skills can be taught? Do we have the resource to teach these skills? Or could somebody else give the resource to teach these skills? And actually, what doesn't matter? I see so many charity adverts with they must be good on Excel. There's loads of free courses on online, and for certain roles you would need to. But with the power of Copilot and free courses online, anyone pretty much can get to a level. And I'm going to put a little asterisk next to anyone. I think set realistic award. I think determined salary benefits can reflect market rates and your budget honestly. So I think this is really really key. You may have a budget of £30,000 for an opportunity, and that may include all of the costs around that individual. Actually, you aren't going to do you as a charity any good, nor the candidate, if market rate for that opportunity is 60k, but you purely don't have the money. It's not going to make sense to put an advert out if you're wildly outside that opportunity. So I think at this really early stage, it's important to be creative and think, okay, well, we've got this budget. Could we employ somebody on a part-time basis? Okay, of the parts of the role that are really important, which parts are most important? Are there parts that aren't important? What could we take around this? So I think it's really important to salary benchmark, and I think it's really important to really think about how can we be realistic, and how can we match that with what we're going to attract there. Finding value without extra costs, and I think that this is something I touched on right at the start. Salary in the cost of living crisis can always be a challenge, but we know that the charity sector struggle with this. We know that. But I think that often the most mission-driven candidates respond to packages that go beyond pay. I think that, candidates will want to know, despite you being a charity, what is your social responsibility? What is your values? How do you operate as a charity? I remember in my time in recruitment, a candidate that what was put off an opportunity, quite honestly, with the charity that I won't give too much away about the charity. Oxfordshire is a small place, but because they were really non-green friendly. They went to the offices and paper was being wasted and all of these things just had no green credentials, and they asked as part of that interview process, and that totally put them off. That is just one very small example, but I think it's really important to understand that full attraction to the candidate and how do you attract. So lead with your mission and impact. Think about the difference that your work makes. A purpose is going to be a real draw for a charity. how can you really give that insight into your work? And I think as part of an interview process, if you are a charity that works with, I don't know, autistic young adults, actually let let those candidates meet your service users as part of the interview process. Go and spend some time in your cafe. Go and spend some time seeing the impact of your work. I think that can make a real difference. And as part of your application process, talk about what impacts in the community you're looking for this role to make. Flexibility and growth, I think, is really key. In my experience, and I've used this phrase quite a lot, the biggest reason that candidates leave jobs is because either of misaligned aspirations, or misaligned values. Let's focus on aspirations. How many times have we heard, "I've gone as far as I can go," or um, "I'm looking for a step up"? And actually, it's really important we never have a cliff edge. I know with funding cycles, it's very difficult sometimes to predict, but actually, it's really important, despite being a charity, we're having those regular one-to-ones. We're understanding what candidates enjoy. We're understanding what they're trying to work to, and using phrase like, let's make sure you add that to your CV. Make sure you add that project to your CV. Would you like to work on this? And actually, that mentoring and professional development and that support can often really outweigh the salary gap, as well as some of the things we spoke about, by having certain levels of flexibility. So, in a charity that I support, are always absolutely dead in August. Their need for work is so much smaller than the rest of the year. Does it make sense to work skeleton staff over that period of time, and actually give their staff a lot more time off? Is does that help with childcare costs with children over the summer holidays? Absolutely, yes. And then I think the piece I would, and I'm going to be really bullish here, if that's okay, and talk about a strong induction. For both candidate and employer, your interview process doesn't stop the day you start. It's really important you turn up, for a candidate point of view, turn up plenty of time on the first day, bring a notepad with you, be professionally dressed, be friendly, ask lots of questions, and kind of set that tone early on. We all know that our unconscious bias will make a perception on a candidate in that first day. But from an employer's point of view, don't push that higher through if you don't have the time to give a good induction. Really simple things, and we see this in the, I guess, commercial sector a lot. Make sure you tell the candidate where to leave their car, and make sure that somebody shows them where to get their lunch and how to make a cup of tea, and all of those really simple things that make somebody feel welcome. Don't presume that they're going to know how to do everything. This isn't about spending lots of money. This is actually making sure that you put the really right foundations in place to enable that candidate to drive to absolutely thrive. It's so important, and it will drive retention. And we all know that the biggest cost of recruitment is somebody leaving, an unsuccessful hire. If you put those foundations in place, you will thrive. In terms of bringing talent into the charity sector, I think the big thing that Jenny kindly touched on before starting is acknowledge the transition. What are going to be the changes? That I think that's the first thing. People coming from commercial roles are going to have skills that are going to be really valuable, but there will absolutely be a transition, and I always see it time and time again. So understand what are these new skills that you could bring, and how can our charity benefit, and recognize those. But what are going to be the needs of that individual and the transition period, and how are we going to work to that together? I always think brushing things under the carpet is never going to work. Let's handle this up front on. Let's have a conversation, put together a plan. We've spoken about that onboarding and mentoring. For me, I think that this is the single biggest and most important thing of a successful hire. How strong is that onboarding? Is there a mentor? Is there somebody within your organization that has come from a commercial sector, a year ago. Can they support that? That could be a really good opportunity. Is there an opportunity for them to spend some time, even if their role isn't, fundraising focused, but if you're involved in the Oxford Half Marathon, is there an opportunity for them to quite early on in their tenure to get on the ground and see some of that work? And I think that the other thing that I think is really important is communicate the reward. What is the impact? What is the fulfillment of working within the voluntary sector? Be visible, but also what is expected? I think that's really, really, really key because I think we often get this in all sectors with early careers individuals. Um, and it just a really, really key thing. So I think I mentioned before, we launched a graduate program, and it's so common in your first job to, for employers to say, "Oh, they were packing up 5 minutes before the end of the day." And I know it sounds like a small thing, but actually, that's not what we do here. Or actually, I was doing a training session and they were on their phone. I think it's really important that that's just one example that's maybe out of sector. But I think it's really important that we communicate, what is okay, what do we do? Because actually, if we don't communicate, some people just don't know. So I think that's really, really, really important. But I think we all understand that whether it's bringing people from outside the charity sector, whether it be different backgrounds or different cultures, having a diverse workforce is so powerful. And I think we really, really need to encourage new talent, new ideas, new backgrounds into the wonderful sector that we're also passionate about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about retaining your best talent now. And I think that I'm probably going to go a little bit off slide here, if that's okay. I think for me, the biggest and most important thing, and I've said this 3 times, is aspirations, values, and I think the other piece is communication. Um, I so regularly talk to employers, both in the charity and outside, or used to. I don't own a recruitment business anymore, but I used to talk to employers who said, I was just so shocked. I'd planned this big promotion for them, or I was so shocked. We were just waiting for some funding to come through, and we were going to reband this role, or actually, I'm just so shocked. I thought they were totally happy. And I think that is something that is so common, and it all comes down to communication. A friend of mine, a guy called Paul Grace, follow him on LinkedIn. He shares some really amazing stuff. He does a lot in the charity sector now, and he was the chief marketing director at Coca-Cola. He had a tough upbringing, and then that trauma came back, and then ended up having a mental breakdown. He was the guy who put the names on the Coke bottles, really really cool. But anyway, nevertheless, his role was all about post his breakdown was all he went into a HR function and was all about building culture where it's okay to communicate and transparency. And one of the things that he did all the time is he set the culture of 1 to 10. How's everyone feeling today? Give a number, give a number, give a number. And actually, okay, so what can we do to get you up a number? And I appreciate that's just a really simple task, but actually, once somebody applies for another role or once somebody starts handing their notice, it's too late. So actually, how are we building in, even just a short monthly catch up to make sure that our team have got a plan of what they're working towards, but also they're happy as an individual, I think is really, really key. The 3 things that I think can really help with that is investing in development. And the investment in development isn't necessarily money, just to be really, really clear. It could be working on a new project. It could be doing a training course. It could be gaining more experience. It could be working towards a promotion. And I think the word promotion really sounds like it's a totally new role. I think often a promotion can be almost like a slope as opposed to a set of stairs, rather than working really, really hard to learn a job and then doing the same job for 2 years, then working really, really hard to learn the next job. Actually, how can we evolve roles over a period of time with AI and technology and all of the changes in our councils here in Oxfordshire? There are going to be changes, and actually that will create opportunity for candidates to feel like they're taking on and they're learning and they're working towards something. Culture and inclusion, I think, is really, really key. Be inquisitive. I think there's an amazing Marcus Rashford advert. Google it if you've not seen it. Which is like it's okay to be inquisitive, and I think that understand, what are your people interested in? How can they feel part of what you're doing? How can they be aligned with your mission? How can they, have that real kind of belonging, I think is really key. And I think that psychological safety, going back to I know that a lot of charities in Oxfordshire get money from councils. I know that a lot get funding from other sources, and it's a bit of a turbulent time for charities, isn't it? If we, people can still remember COVID, actually by just leaving the unknown of, oh, we don't know where our money's coming from, it's really tough. Actually, by having those conversations up front, I think that can have a really really big back difference. The final thing, which I think is often the most simple but the most underrated thing all employers do, is recognition and feedback. Um, I am going to say this in the most egotistical way. I genuinely think the thing that I was best at whilst owning Thompson and Terry is shouting about my team. I would so regularly post about, Aoife, you've done an amazing job. Shannon, you've done this. So and so's done this, and really shout about your talent, openly, and just small words, the brilliant, or the thank you, or WhatsApp after work. Oh, thanks so much for doing that project today. I really appreciate it. It's amazing. But also that regular feedback is really, really key. The thing that, I hated most about recruitment, and I didn't think I'd use the word hated in this presentation, but the thing I used to hate most about recruitment is where you see an individual leave an organization, and the employer says, well, I thought they were amazing, like they're doing a brilliant job. Oh, did you tell them? Oh, no, I just presume they knew. Or actually, an individual being exited from an organization, they were really struggling for this period of time. But when did you last have a one-to-one? Oh, we did it 6 months ago. How were things then? Oh, really good then. So I think it's really important, even if you don't have the resource to do one-to-ones, an hour-long one-to-one, which I did with all my team in my previous business every month, even if it is just that 10-minute check-in and that regular feedback. You've done this really, really well, but could you work on this? How could you work in this area? I think that constructive feedback, regular constructive feedback, both positive recognition and have you tried this? Can we work on this? How can we get a solution? I think really will engage your workforce over a period of time, and enable a really, really good opportunity to grow. So, charities and the youth unemployment crisis. If I'm honest, I am embarrassed that we've got a youth unemployment crisis in the UK, especially in Oxfordshire. We're globally renowned for our education. We There's lots of money in Oxfordshire, but Oxfordshire is one of the areas that is having the biggest youth unemployment crisis. There are lots of wonderful charities doing an amazing work, but this cannot be delivered by itself. There we go. I'm going to get off my soapbox. But there is such an opportunity for charities to be involved in this. Partly traineeships, apprenticeship programs, as touched on by Jenny at the start of this call. Charities need fresh ideas and resource and enthusiasm and springs in step, and actually creating the future talent can be such a great way to bring real commercial benefit. Can we just add that real commercial benefit to organizations whilst giving an opportunity to kickstart a career? From my perspective, it is really important that there is a win-win here. We shouldn't be offering apprenticeship programs or trainee programs just to tick a box. I think that's really, really important. We should be offering them that are going to make a tangible difference to you as a charity and a tangible difference to that candidate. And that might be that actually the apprenticeship salary is lower than a normal individual. And that piece of work could be delivered and learned quite quickly by a young person. And actually, you don't have the need for them long term, but you are giving them 12 months experience. We all know big employers under their CSR love individuals that have volunteered or worked in the charity sector. So you're just giving them an opportunity to kickstart their career. But the win to you is it's a way to recruit a role at maybe 20% below what you would have to pay for a different individual. That can be a perfectly ethical why. It totally can. But I think that it's really important, going back to the earlier slide, that there is a real mission and there's a real reason for that role that it's going to make an impact, and you've got the resource to train that individual. And that could be often through the apprenticeship provider. Like a lot of that can be covered there, but it's important that you've really looked into how that can be delivered. And then I think community impact and sector legacy is something that I really want to talk about. So I think offering opportunities to young people, I think, really is building community impact. It's bringing the next generation of people that care, people that are kind, people that want to make a difference to the sector. And even if they don't stay in it forever, I think that we're bringing that sector legacy, we're bringing that community of Oxfordshire together. And I think it's so key that we're kindly and opening our doors and bringing this next generation in. So I really encourage you as an organization to really think about what can you do that would benefit you as a charity, but also help this youth unemployment crisis. And a personal offer, if I can help any way with any of this, complete complimentary. I'm really happy to spend time with any charity that would like to discuss this. Would be a real pleasure. And